Oh, hey, I'm glad you're here. I want you to close your eyes, unless you're driving, then don't do that, and imagine the halls of your childhood home. Do you see pictures on the walls? Perhaps pictures of your lifetime, or perhaps even further back, images of family that maybe you never met. For me, when I close my eyes, I see the VHS box art as I walked and played in the aisles of the video store I grew up in. I see the ominous cover of Soul Survivor. I see the super rad front of Future Kill, the talking box of Frankenhooker. I see 2020 Texas Gladiators, Junior smiling at me through the chainsaw hole in the door. I see the silhouette of Madman Mars. I see so many, and I've mentioned many of them before, but seeing them today brings me right back to my home in the video store. And much like that store brought me and people together to talk about and recommend movies and discover movies, that's what I've strived to do with this podcast. Hopefully, I've succeeded to some extent, especially when there's movies that aren't widely celebrated. And speaking of celebrating, we have a P.O. box. Yeah. Those of you on the Patreon know I love sending people things, but now, for the first time, you can send something to us. Maybe you made a movie, maybe you just want me to see something, or you really connected with a theme or a guest and want to let me know more than a typed little message on Instagram or something. You can send cards, art, stickers, anything you'd like. Send it to 4207 Southeast Woodstock Boulevard, number 472, Portland, Oregon, 97206. That's 4207 Southeast Woodstock Boulevard, number 472, Portland, Oregon, 97206. Also, July 27th, this Saturday, is my birthday. So feel free to send me anything to that P.O. box, or even just tell me your favorite episode or something that we've done, a guests we've had. Anything means a lot to me, and I appreciate it. It seems like a fun way to interact and make the world a little smaller, and I hope it spawns some fun interactions. Ooh, with that smooth transition, let's just slide right into the episode. It's Spawn with Patrick and Ryan. Enjoy.
Innocence can be hell. Innocence can be hell. Can be hell. Innocence can be hell. Innocence can be hell.
Greetings and salutations. This is VHS, and I'm your host, Dirk Marshall. This episode, I'm taking a page from my previous comic book movies episode and welcoming two guests. The first of which was rocketed to Earth from the moon as a baby and gained his superpowers because of the crescent moon resembling a banana. Welcome back. Wait, no. That's Banana Man. I'm sorry. My first guest is co-host of the Chainsaws and Claws podcast. Welcome back, Patrick Vicious.
Hey, I would like to be Banana Man. That's a fantastic,
Yes.
that's a fantastic 90s indie comic. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Pretty good. Good cartoon. My second guest is co-host of the, wait, no. He was a poor guy living on his dad's farm until an Irish fairy gave him a magic lantern. Oh no, that's Jack-o'-lanterns. Super Friends, issue number 8. It's actually co-host of the New World Pictures podcast. Ryan Gowland, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Yep. That story is true about me, though, in my life. So,
Arm.
so I didn't realize that till this moment that me and Jack-o'-lantern were kindred spirits, but
This
it's
is the
true.
same origin story.
Yeah, same origin story.
Now, Patrick, we heard your comic origin story in our first conversation, but in case this is the first episode someone hears, please tell us how you got into comics and what some of your early favorites were.
For as long as I can remember, I've enjoyed like comics and superheroes, like from when I was like little. I don't remember a time when I wasn't into Batman or the X-Men or whatever. And it's funny because as much as I love like Batman, Daredevil, X-Men, Wolverine, Punisher, Green Lantern, for like the reason like when you brought this up, I was stoked to do it. was because when I was 12, I met this kid who had literally a drawer of his dresser full of comic books, and they were all pretty much either X-Men or Image Comics, which is how I got into Spawn.
Okay.
He had like Spawn, Youngblood, like all those original ones, Savage Dragon.
Whoa, I don't even know those last two.
Okay, basically Youngblood was the first ones, with the exception of Spawn and Savage Dragon. All of the kind of Image guys, like they're the guys who started with Image Comics, kind of just brought the thing that they were already popular doing at Marvel over to their thing and changed it just enough to not get sued.
Got it.
So Youngblood was kind of like an Avengers kind of a thing with these original characters. And then you had like Wildcats, which was like X-Men, but with original characters, and like you go on and on. And they say it was like the exception of like Spawn, where Todd McFarlane actually made something basically from scratch. I mean, like, there's definitely elements of Batman in there, but it still feels like pretty much from scratch. And like what Eric Larson did with like Savage Dragon was very original. And that book still exists today, just like Spawn. Whereas like Youngblood and Wildcats and stuff all been
Not
lost to the sands
no
of
more.
time.
Okay. Ryan, what about you in comics?
Comics, I'll show you right here. One I'm hanging on my wall is the very first issue, first comic I ever got. I went to the store with my mom, and she said, "You want me to buy you a comic book?" I said, "Sure." And she bought me the Spectacular Spider-Man number 107, which I now have signed from the author, Peter David. But this comic, I just thought it was, the old 1970s TV show. I thought it was Spider-Man from the Electric Company. I thought it was just maybe even 60s Batman TV show style stuff. And in this, his friend, one of Peter Parker's friends who's on the police, gets murdered by this guy who comes around in a hood and a shot-off shotgun, and he's called the Sin Eater, and he just murders people for their sins. And I was like, this isn't what I thought comic books were. I thought they were something totally lame. And I was like, well, I'm hooked. And I grew up in San Diego, so I went to comic conventions every year and just got full into it. So at the time of Image and the starting of that and Spawn, I was out of comics for that period of time because I was too cool.
Right.
I was like, I'm out reading superhero stuff, man. And that's when I was reading like 8 Ball and Hate and,
Sure.
Reading zines and lots of stuff that I thought was cool and underground, knowing that I actually was never cool ever. So,
But you came back around to it?
and I still have comics to this day. I still, I read comics still.
I had that too. It was just like a couple of years later.
Mhm.
I remember when Marvel Knights started. So I was probably like 15, I think. I was really into that for like a brief period. And then it was kind of a similar thing where I was just like, I got really into like hardcore, and I was just like, comics. Like, these are awesome, but I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just putting all my focus on music. And then it was after I like was basically 4 years of not really doing anything particularly big in a band. It was like, there's still comics. Let's come back to those.
Yeah. I think it's when we moved back to, or when I moved back to California, we moved into LA. I got my old comics from my parents, and I just started going to comic book stores and just getting right back into it and really, putting my comics properly away and stuff like that. So I kind of just fell right back into it. So
Yeah, for me, it was pretty spotty. I would get comics like Labyrinth and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Like, it was all movie comics.
Sure.
And then, as I'd previously said, I was like, all my friends are collecting these things. I'm going to pick a person. So I picked Wolverine because he was kind of like Freddy. And then I got like the first 40. And then I was like, okay, we're done. And they kept coming out. And I was like, no, we're done. And then it wasn't until like the work of like Jonan Vasquez that I was like, oh no, I really like this. And it's, mostly from the art form, perspective. But yeah, the more I dig into this and anime and manga stuff, I realize that I actually really like a lot of this stuff that, like you said, Ryan, at a certain point in your life, you go, no, this is lame. I'm cool,
Yeah. Well,
And,
yeah. I
and
said that about a lot of things, and I was wrong about all of them, but and I fell right back into all of them eventually. So I'm like, I don't know. There's just a time when every young person just decides, you know what, I'm going to be up my own ass for a few years, and I'm going to be proud of it, and I'm going to talk about it like it's cool.
Yep.
And then later on, you're like, it's embarrassing. But
Yeah.
oh well, we all go through it. So
Sitting in a room surrounded by all of those things.
yeah, totally, totally.
Okay.
I have it all. I have it all up here in my
Yep.
new shelves that I'm putting together. So yeah, and that period in the '90s and the stuff when Spawn really hit, and the '90s and early 2000s. That's when like artists sort of took over. Marvel fell apart in the '90s, did not do well, almost went bankrupt.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I remember that was like the story that Brian Bendis told, where he was like, when he was writing Ultimate Spider-Man and bringing issues in, he was just like, they were just selling all fucking furniture, and he's just like, writing the last Marvel comic. Like, holy shit!
That's when they sold all the rights, pretty
Yeah.
much. They had sold the rights to all the characters. They were just trying to, in the '90s, they were just doing a fire sale, trying to keep themselves afloat. And at that point in time, the artists became bigger than even the writers, where it had been such a writer's medium or a writer's with an artist, but the artists sort of took over in the '90s. I mean, I remember reading Amazing Spider-Man, and I still have, I didn't bust them out for this, but I have the first Todd McFarlane drawn comic of Amazing Spider-Man. I believe it's number 298. And of course, the infamous 300, which is like, been redone a million times over. And Todd McFarlane became so big drawing Spider-Man that he eventually gets his own Spider-Man comic just called Spider-Man, which he wrote and drew. And that was around the time when I was like, to hell with it. But Todd McFarlane, the way he drew the webs, the way that he drew the characters, like he was a phenomenon. So by the time he did Spawn, like Todd McFarlane stuff just hit a total fever pitch. And I remember how popular it was and how much my friends at the time talking about the Spawn movie, how bananas they all were, like, we gotta go see the Spawn. However, I will say, just to preface this before we start talking, I also decided to go back and listen and watch the first season of the Spawn HBO show called Todd McFarlane's Spawn, which of course all my friends were like, we gotta watch the show because the show's so much better. So I went and watched the first season again just to prep.
Okay.
I watched the first season again. When HBO Max first started, they had that on there. That was the first thing that I watched. I was just like, oh my God, I gotta do this. And then I watched it again. And I was just like, honestly, that cartoon, I would argue, is the best version of Spawn. And I mean, including the comic.
Yep.
That is the best version of Spawn. They take everything that worked with the comics and made it better. The movie didn't completely do that. The fact that the cartoon, they knew how to modulate the things that worked, I was just like, God bless them for it. Like, that's why I keep watching that forever.
With the exception of the Todd McFarlane intros.
Yes.
Which they shoot for each episode, which is funny enough, they were shot by Doug Liman, who would go on to do Swingers and Go and the first Bourne movie and everything else. He shot those very early on in his career. However, those intros are the worst.
Oh yeah.
And the great thing about owning this DVD of the whole series is that, you can put on the next episode and you can fast forward through that, and then what happened in the last episode, you can get right back into the episode. And so it's nice to be able to speed through that stuff, because those are not great.
Speaking of people disappeared up their own ass.
Oh my God, dude.
I feel bad because I did meet Todd once and he was like the nicest dude in the world to me. He had no reason to be either, because I met him at a restaurant when I was having breakfast and I saw he and Greg Capullo across the room.
Oh, cool.
And I was just like, if I
Another
don't say
artist.
something, I love Greg Capullo.
Yeah, who drew Batman for a long time was. I'm just trying to bring Dirk up to speed.
Yeah, totally.
I'm with you, Patrick.
I don't know who.
But I was just like, if I don't say something, I'm going to kill myself. So like, I went over and I talked to them and told them how important Spawn was to me, and they got up and like shook my hand and like thanked me profusely. I don't want to talk to you about Todd ever, because he could have been a total dick to me and he wasn't. So like,
I have never met him. I've seen him at conventions, but never like decided to wait in line for the super long line to have him sign my Spider-Man 300 or whatever else, which he often says he won't sign. But for both of these, listening to him on the commentaries, whew, I mean, yikes, Todd. I mean, no one's a bigger fan of Todd than Todd,
That's fair.
Did you listen to the commentary for the film?
Oh, yeah.
The way they record it, they introduce him every once in a while, but they cut him out of 90%.
Well, they go back and forth, because I think they shot it with the director and the producer together, and then the special effects guy opposite, or maybe he's with the producer.
Yeah.
Yeah, they recorded it a bunch and then chopped it all up. But in that one, and that commentary, you get to hear a bunch of people that are like,
Yes.
well, thank you for watching the best thing you'll ever put your eyes on.
Well,
And
the director does say the first thing he says is he's like, "You can just blame me for everything." And I thought
he
that's a
does.
great way to start a commentary.
But then he also gets into like, here are the things that, were the films that made me the filmmaker that I am today, which is stuff like, bro, you just made Spawn. Just calm down. Chill out. Know where you are.
I knew nothing of Todd McFarlane when this came out. I saw the toys around. I heard of Spawn. I saw everything, I feel like, at this time in the theater, so I was gonna see it regardless. But it was the soundtrack that really drew me to it, like Patrick and I were talking about before recording, because they combined electronic music artists with like metal people, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. Judgment Night rules. And this is not the same soundtrack as that. But there was a couple songs that I was like, I really like this. And then some of them where I'm like, who curated this?
Yeah.
You're going to put DJ Spooky remixing Metallica? Like, DJ Spooky was pretty avant-garde. Like, that was a deep pull, but it's not super fun to listen to. I'm just going to. Anyway, so at the end of this conversation about this, I am going to quickly ask you each one one comic that you think you would love to see as a movie. And that gives you a lot of time to think about it.
Thank you for the warning.
As we first discuss Spawn. Few facts up top. Do either of you know Spawn's favorite movie?
The character of Spawn?
Yeah, it's a fish called Wanda! Okay, all right. Just warming us up here. Columbia Pictures showed interest in making a film adaptation of Spawn when the comic book was launched in '92, but negotiations eventually fell through as Todd McFarlane felt the studio was not giving him enough creative control. He eventually sold the rights to New Line for $1 in exchange for the creative input and merchandising rights, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, he had actually really wanted to. He said, think for the series. He said when they sat him down, this is him saying it. He goes, they sat me down. They said, Todd, what do you really want to do? If you really could do anything you wanted with Spawn, what would you want to be? And he said, I'd like it to be a cartoon.
And they said no.
And they did. They made it. It comes out the same year. In fact, it comes out before. The first season of the HBO show actually comes out before the movie. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they made it all around the same time. So as they're talking about in the commentary for Spawn, they're talking about how they hadn't seen the series, but they knew it was being made. So as they were making the movie. So that was the medium that he truly wanted. So he got both. He got both the movie and though they have to make it PG-13 or R.
Yeah.
I guess they made it PG-13 initially for theatrical.
Yeah.
This one, I have the DVD here, and this one is supposedly R. I saw it in the theater, so I know I saw the PG-13 version, but
yeah, so I haven't seen it in a long enough time that I don't know the differences.
Yeah, me neither.
There's nothing that I watched it and I was just like, yes, this is what pushed it into the R-rated territory.
I have it all written down, so
okay.
I'll tell you.
Okay, because they mention it during the commentary. They talk about some of the changes. Yeah,
I will say though, like Todd's creative control thing, credit where it's due. Todd is really smart, even though he's like up his own ass. But the whole reason Image Comics exists is because if back in the day, in the 70s, when you had this huge stable at Marvel where they all kind of became disillusioned with Marvel, they all kind of dropped off one by one. If they all had just started their own thing together, they probably would have been very successful. So then he goes to all of the other, like it's almost like forming the Avengers. Like he like gets Jim Lee, goes to Rob Liefeld, goes to like Jim Valentino, goes to Eric Larson, goes to everybody. Hey, we want to start up our own shop and we're going to own everything. It'll be ours. I still feel really bad for the guys, Len Wein, who like created Wolverine and never saw a fucking dime. I get his point. He's smart. It's just a matter of, it's weird that he still to this day is so hell-bent on having total control, even though a lot of the best Spawn stuff is by other people. That's why, like, he spent years in the legal battle with Neil Gaiman over the freaking Angelo Cogliostro and everything because of his own hypocrisy, where he was just like, oh, yes, no, I own this. That's literally the opposite of what this was. You literally said this is not what we were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Rob Liefeld would still love to get some of that Deadpool money as well. Mm-hmm. So he's still kind of living in that world a little bit, but he certainly got way more out of the whole exchange than Len Wein. So
We also have a couple other names that were initially attached to this film. Only in conversation, I didn't find anything to actually support that there was documentation of it, but Tim Burton was wanted to direct it initially, which,
I mean, sure.
I mean,
I'm sure they bandied
okay.
his name around.
Yeah, yeah. Alex Proyas was attached to the film,
That would have been rad, actually.
but left to do Dark City. And there's some stuff
That's
in this that I look at and I go, that's like an Alex Proyas shot. Like some of the stuff in the set on top of the cathedral-y building, it's like this has a Crow feel to it for
Oh yeah,
sure. Like
down to the soundtrack. What you're
Yeah,
talking about. I mean,
yeah.
this has so much influence of the Crow in this. Not only in the character too, quite frankly.
Oh
you know?
yeah. And the casting, I think, of Michael Jai White, who wasn't really well known at the time,
No.
but as someone like Brandon Lee, super like, good fighting, and the choreography was really awesome. You could use the physicality of the character. I mean, it makes sense. Other actors that were up for Spawn were Wesley Snipes, Cuba Gooding Jr., Tupac, Ving Rhames, and Snoop Dogg.
I think it was basically like if you were of African American persuasion and you had an acting career, it was like your name was in the hat for Spawn.
The weirdest being Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
He's been playing Snoop Dogg for years, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's very good at it. Will Smith declined to go do Men in Black.
He honestly made the right choice. Will Smith is a god to me. I think he would have been objectively way better than Michael Jai White, but like at the same time, I don't think that anyone in this movie could have gotten on his level per se. I mean, the only person that maybe did was Martin Sheen, but
I don't know if he would have even done it though. Like, has he done another character where he had this much prosthetics put on him? Like, I mean, to act through the prosthetics, I dare anyone to try to get it all, like
that's fair.
No.
you know. And I do think Michael J. White now would he do an even better job, I think,
of course,
of the character than this. But like I'm not sure that Will Smith would have ever done this because this is too much.
And then Edward Norton was attached to be the DB Sweeney character.
Okay.
That would have been exponentially better.
He went to do Rounders.
I do think the one thing though is they apparently were hell bent on making that character white. That character is not white in the comics.
No. And not on the TV show as well, but
yeah, so the fact that they were like, it must be a white guy.
Well, there's two stories to that. One is people saying like it was always going to be a white or African American guy, and depending on who they cast, so they were seeing both. But there's also stories that it's this year, 97, and so they were like, or 94 or something, when they were really deep in this, and then they were like, if we have too many African American people, they'll think it's an African American movie. And for people in 2024 that are shocked, that's how a lot of decisions were made in movies back in the day, unfortunately. And so they're like, we got to have a white guy. So that's where we get DB Sweeney in the character.
I will say in the commentary, they do say DB Sweeney did us a favor, but we did audition a lot of blacks for the role.
Oh gosh, yes.
I'm using their phrasing.
That's how they say it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is not my phrasing. I want that very clear.
There could have been worse phrasing, to be fair, but like there's not much worse.
But that's still not great.
It's not great. No.
That is not great phrasing, in my opinion.
Unfortunate phrasing as he's defending his decision. You're just like, oh, we don't believe you.
Right. You're digging yourself a different, deeper hole.
Yes. Yeah. They had 70 days to shoot this, and they traded 7 of the principal photography days for more special effects money so they could shoot the hell sequence in the film. And I think as we're looking at this movie,
what a mistake.
A lot of things from a special effects standpoint that, they're really trying to push and do at this time, because the director, which we're about to talk about, was coming from the world of special effects. And you're going to sacrifice movie stuff because you want to make the effects. It's just one of the things that I think, okay, I think I understand some of the reasons that this turned out the way that it did. Our director is Mark DePay, who did Frankenfish, Marmaduke, Garfield's Pet Force, known for special effects work on Jurassic Park, The Abyss, and Terminator 2.
But this is his directorial debut.
This is his debut. I spoke with a previous guest who worked with him on Frankenfish and said that on set, he was a very quiet person, not super social, and just super focused on the effects part. And so looking at this film, having now watched it a couple times recently, I could really see that. I could understand like some of the decision making that went into this, because if your eyes are on that one prize, And this is a time where CG is really in a transitionary phase. And so a lot of these films, I think, get maligned just because of the quote unquote quality of the effects now. But I think I started to have a lot of empathy towards this Spawn movie. And I dare say now that I kind of really like it. And I didn't when I saw this before. I saw it once in the theater and I never thought of
Mm-hmm.
it again. I was telling
Mm-hmm.
Patrick, I saw Michael J. White in a conversation where he was like, I never said the movie was good. I've never ever said it was good. And I was like, everyone hates this movie. And I thought, you know what? I want to take some fresh eyes and look at this thing because now I own a ton of Vinegar Syndrome movies. And I can't say, like, these are all 5-star movies, but yet everyone craps on Spawn. So I was like, you know what? Let's sit down and look at this, why this is the way it is, what it is, and
Yeah, I hear you on that, but Vinegar Syndrome, they're not even saying these are 5-star
Yeah.
movies. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, the
Like
way I will
everybody
say,
went in to Spawn to make a 5-star movie. Like no one went in thinking, well, this one might be something that people later think is fun as a curiosity.
sure, okay,
You know, that they can add to their physical media collections and have a quality of the time. That's not what anyone was thinking going into this.
That's
They were
fair.
like, this is the biggest comic going. It was selling millions of copies per
Yeah.
issue. It was a huge comic. And everybody was like, this is going to be amazing. And I mean, I saw it at the time too. And I was like, that was not good.
I will say, when I first saw it, it was my favorite movie of that summer. But to be fair, I was a teenager, so
Sure.
take that with a grain of salt. Also, the thing that I was saying before, like we actually started recording, was I was like, this, I realized when I was rewatching it, it came out in like a really weird time where it was right after you had the Phantom and the Shadow, and like right before you had Blade.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
right in the middle where it's trying to like kind of reach past where it was and reach forward. And it
Mhm.
doesn't quite get there, but I could see what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
I feel like people are weird now about comic book stuff in general. This is in no way shade because I love the Marvel stuff and everything. The people that argue that the MCU is kind of homogenous, I don't necessarily disagree. I just don't dislike what they're making. If there's an ice cream company that like makes a bunch of similar flavors, but I like all of the flavors, it's fine. I'm still having a good time. Whereas in the case of like Spawn, I kind of enjoy it watching it now. Wouldn't go as far as say like I love it or anything, because at least it feels different than other stuff that you get. Now it's like you get like extremes where it'll either be like the MCU stuff, which has a very specific feel, or you'll get like the DCU stuff, which tried to have a specific feel and then that didn't really work out. For a while, very the opposite of the Marvel feeling, almost reactionary. So when you watch Spawn now, for me at least, it's cool because it's different. It's not what I would go as far as say like great. Like it's not like I can put it like in the same conversation as my favorite comic book films or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But like I would watch it the same way I would watch like The Phantom or The Rocketeer or anything like that.
Yeah, I would say though, one of the things that this movie was made in was its post Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And we just talked about this on our podcast because we did a whole month about Marvel stuff because New World Pictures owned Marvel in the late 80s. And we were talking about Trial of the Incredible Hulk, which is a TV movie. We talked about the effects in that, which is this is 89. And then you have 4 years later, you have Jurassic Park. And so we were laughing because it was like the difference of the special effects. It's like we take a giant leap. And into this movie, which had to be made in 96, comes out in 97, you're talking about studios thinking, this guy knows special effects. We can just do it all with special effects. Look at Jurassic Park. This is what we can do now. And it speaks to like an understanding that there is a brand new, toolkit we can use, but also not understanding it at all. And maybe technicians of it who haven't had any experience making movies don't understand the tone of Spawn, because the difference of the cartoon, the HBO series, and the movie, and certainly you can do more in animation than you can that they tried to animate almost the entire movie, but you can do better in actual animation than CG at the time. But it's really the difference between the two. The ultimate one, watching them both just recently, was like the difference is the tone of it.
Mm-hmm.
One of them gets the tone of it, and one of them doesn't know quite how to express it. In fact, the commentary that we're talking about, the director talks about the alleyway, which is the place between the two worlds, right? And he goes through the entire thing and explains what it is. And I was like, wow, That's a great summation. I wish that was in this movie
Hmm.
because it's not explained. None of this stuff is explained. And yet, somehow, even though it's not expressly done through the animation or the images, it also comes across very well and very simply in the HBO series.
Hmm.
So it's a matter of just getting someone, yes, who can understand the use of the special effects, but also someone who can understand the tone. And that's where I think this one kind of, no disrespect to the director, he probably could nail it now, but at the time he was so new.
Yeah.
The look on Dirk's face was my favorite thing.
We'll just move on from the director and get to it's written by Todd McFarlane and Alan McElroy, who wrote Halloween 4, Rapid Fire, and most of the Wrong Turn movies. Did I say it wrong?
I think it's McElroy, but I don't think it really matters.
Yes, of course.
He does the animated series.
Yeah. And it's edited by Michael Knew, I think is how you say that, who did the Daredevil TV series, and Todd Bush that did Star Wars Episode 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Prom, Spider-Man Hello Dance. I'm just kidding, but every time I hear Spider-Man Homecoming, I just think it's something totally different from what the movie actually is about. He also did Spider-Man Sadie Hopkins. No, I'm just kidding. Cinematographer is Guillermo Navarro, who did Kronos, Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy 2, and From Dusk Till Dawn. I was like, what? That's incredible.
That's why it looks good. That's my main thing is I'm not shitting on the director. And I mean, to be fair, the only thing I will say as far as the tone goes, it also might have been a studio thing, whereas like HBO was more down to be like, yeah, just make the comic. Whereas like I think the studio would have been like, no, this is a multi-million-dollar movie we're making for children. You make a goddamn fucking superhero movie out of it. You make Batman. You understand me?
Right.
So it's like I don't really know that's his fault. I mean, it could be. Who the hell knows?
That surprised me, that Guillermo Navarro, because I love his work. He also shot Jackie Brown, and his Desperado just looks terrific.
Yeah.
It's such a good-looking movie. And yet, it's like this movie has none of like his kind of touches, I feel like.
Yes.
Because so much of it is the CGI.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like they honestly could have gotten anyone to shoot it and you would never know because it has none of his style. And his style's all over Desperado.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not to get on a tangent with Robert Rodriguez, but when people talk about what happened to him, I'm like, well, he stopped using DPs and he started just doing it himself. And like when you have a DP like he did in Desperado, you can see kind of, you get some really cool stuff, so it's different.
Yeah.
Part of me wants to yell at you because I do like some of the things he has shot himself. But overall, you're correct.
Hey, I love Robert Rodriguez. I'm a huge fan of Robert Rodriguez. I've seen all his stuff. I even saw his most recent one with Ben Affleck. I'll watch anything, but he doesn't have a spotless record. I'll admit that much.
Oh no, he definitely doesn't now. I mean, he definitely has fallen off considerably. When I was younger, Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith were like my father, son, Holy Spirit.
Sure.
Whenever people like say anything, I'm like, but he's a god. That I'm just like, oh yeah, he makes
absolutely.
Sense. Never mind, we're fine. No,
I was in on El Mariachi right from the get-go and heard the whole story. I read his book.
Yep, me too.
So when Desperado went into theaters, I went and saw it. I was like, I've been in on him from the beginning, and then he starts doing Spy Kids and a bunch of other things, and you're like,
Yeah.
He still has the best part in Four Rooms, so I'll give him,
Yes.
I wasn't a fan until Shark Boy and Lava Girl, but then I was
then you bought in hardcore. Sin City's still fantastic. Like and then he shot that. So
I was gonna say I almost brought that up as an example, and I was just like, that is the only good example I can think of. I can't make this argument.
Yeah, and that is such a style of Frank Miller that he's kind of, but still, it has a great style to it.
Yeah.
I'll give him that. But it's not Desperado. He's never done. Basically, I guess my quote was really more accurate. Should have been, everyone said, why hasn't Robert Rodriguez done another Desperado? Even though he did Once Upon a Time in Mexico. But like that film is not Desperado, not quite. Even though it's a continuation, he has that in him. He just probably needs to add some more people to the pool of people working on the film and not try to do everything himself. It is a collaborative art form, last time I heard.
Speaking of art forms like Spawn and not Robert Rodriguez, the makeup effects in this movie were made by Norman Cabrera and Robert Kurtzman, Greg Nicotero. I mean, holy smokes. Talk about things I didn't appreciate in 1997. The makeup effects in this, watching it on a Blu-ray in high definition, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really incredible stuff for the time when they're like huge appliances they're putting on people. And it's pretty great for, what's
fucking John
money.
Leguizamo is completely encased in makeup and prosthetics.
Yeah, they show him, and he's a baby when this movie was made. It's incredible.
Mhm.
And he's
Mhm.
also squatting the entire time. I
Yep.
never even thought about that. I guess they didn't want to make him tall, so they made him squat because you can make him rounder.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. I mean, he is already short, so it's weird that he had to be even shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, because in the comic, that's the whole thing. Is like that clown is like little, and then you have when he turns into Violator, it's like this big
Okay.
creature.
Because
But
if
they
Martin
do in the
Sheen
movie,
has
but-
to look down to you, that's short. That is very short. Our cast, we have Michael J. White from Black Dynamite, The Dark Knight, and One More Shot. John Leguizamo from The Pest, Summer of Sam, Romeo and Juliet, and Tu Wong Fu. Martin Sheen from Apocalypse Now and the Captain Planet cartoon series. Teresa Randall from Bad Boys
Sure.
1 and 2, Girl 6, Space Jam, Malcolm X, D.B. Sweeney from Fire in the Sky and the 12 Dogs of Christmas, and Nicole Williamson, who plays Cagliostro,
Coleostro.
which I referred to as just Leprechaun Man for most of this. He was in Excalibur and Return to Oz. The voice of Malebolgia is Frank Welker, who's the voice of Scooby-Doo.
A bad person, a real bad person.
Also in the credits, Nick Danger plays himself. Who's Nick Danger? I don't know, but he's in this movie somewhere.
Frank Welker also, I think he was the original voice of Fred initially, and then he
True.
took over Scooby-Doo later on.
Yeah.
But initially was the original voice of Fred.
Let's split up and search for this ape man who eats hamburgers.
Okay.
He's also like most of the Gremlin and Gremlins.
I not understand this.
That's funny. I just watched Gremlins 2, and somebody asked in the commentary, Joe Dante, they were like, "Who does the voice?" And he was like, "I don't know, Howie." Like he didn't know.
Nice.
And then somebody says, "I think we brought in Frank Welker to do a bunch of voices," and he's like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Like,
do I
oh,
care?
Joe Dante doesn't care who did the
Yeah.
voices.
Like, he was drunk. It's fine.
Yeah, he's not worried about it. That was one of the details he did not give two shits about.
The tagline for this poster is "Born in darkness, sworn to justice, from flesh to steel." But do you guys know Spawn's favorite line from a poster? Not all who wander are lost. Thank you. Thank you. So let's
My
press play.
DVD says it's the special effects movie of the year.
I wish there was a word bubble that Spawn is saying that. Just
It's also from the New Line Platinum series.
Oh,
so, you know.
hey, I have the Blu-ray right here, and it says nothing on the front. This says Spawn. That's all you need to know.
I didn't even know there was a Blu-ray. I just saw the DVD and I got it. So
Well-
now I'm kicking myself. I'm like, God, do I have to upgrade now? this is
Wait for the
Oh.
Even the
video.
4K, it's fine.
yeah, I know, totally. Just go straight from DVD to 4K.
Okay, well, let's press play on Spawn. We start with a flare up of flames and a flame tunnel, and we see a dove, and we get heavy voiceover of excessive exposition from the Leprechaun Man. We get layered images of Martin Sheen and the clown, but don't take my word for it. I'll drop a little bit in the episode right here.
The battle between the darkness and the light has waged eternal. Their armies fueled by souls harvested on earth. The Lord of Darkness, Malebolgia, has sent a lieutenant to recruit men who will help destroy the world in exchange for wealth and power, and provide enough souls to complete his army and allow Armageddon to begin. All Malebolgia needs now is a great soldier. Someone to lead his hordes to the gates of heaven and burn them down.
Next, we see a plane landing in Hong Kong, and a masked assassin shoots everyone in the control tower. He assembles a rocket tripod and then puts on wicked goggles and spies on an airplane, and he fires, and the rocket passes the narrator for some reason. He's there, and I don't know why, but he's there, and blows up the plane, and then he blows up the tripod, and then flames, and we get the credits. And then, oh no, the narrator's back again. He's more narration, and we're like a minute and a half into this movie.
Like him, I killed in the name of good. But the violence of my life pulled my soul towards the darkness. But I fought and freed my soul. Now I watch for others like me. Men are the ones who create evil on Earth. It is the choices they make that enslave their souls. This is the test.
It's one of my pet peeves right now is narration. I just watched a brand new movie that had a narrator through the whole thing, and it made me furious through the whole. And then I talked to someone who loved it, and I was like, "Well, different strokes." Then,
Oh, I will say though for this, and I understand we have a lot of movies that we watch, New World movies that start with a lot of narration.
yeah,
But the narration is put in the wrong spot.
yes,
You need to have a landing spot as an audience where you can get into the movie. In the very beginning, especially when you just have fire and brimstone and nothing that you look at and you know anything of, and you have nothing to ground you, all that voiceover is in the wrong place.
Yeah.
You have no basis of reference yet to formulate any of that stuff. It maybe makes sense when you've seen the movie many times or you know the story already. It doesn't make any sense to you just coming in cold. They needed to get into the story, then fill with voiceover. Because again, the TV show had tons of voiceover, but it works. It's effective because it gives you a grounding moments and then goes into voiceover. This one does the opposite.
I also get the feeling from Leprechaun Man that he thinks this movie's about him. Like the way that he talks is like, I am the lead, and you're like, no, dude, no, it's called Spawn, man.
Again, that's where the TV show really makes sense because the fact that he was the one of the original Spawns, and there are many different Spawns, and this is the current one, is a concept the movie does not explain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of shows you at one point. But that's pretty much the best they give you. Is like they show like in hell, there's a bunch of different guys who look just like Spawn. That's pretty much the best they give you. Yeah. Yeah,
it just has a sort of like, hey, an older guy who's British. He probably knows what he's talking about. So that's all we know. That's our touchstone.
Oh, we next see people on the news not stoked on the slaughtering of those people. And the film has many wild transitions. This one we morph through the TV. And speaking of TVs, do either of you know Spawn's favorite TV show?
Oh, God.
WandaVision. Okay, moving right along. Martin Sheen's meeting with
I thought that was what it was going to be, but I was just like, I just want to let Dirk have his moment. I just want to let you have his moment. I just want you to, you're loving this. You preface this by saying 3 dads talking about Spawn.
Yes.
And you did not tell us you were going to have nothing but dad jokes throughout.
Okay.
So, but it makes sense. You said it.
I did. Martin Sheen's meeting with a strange silhouette. It's the clown, and he wants Simmons with his Hell Army, and we get this flame wipe. There's lots of crazy wipes in this movie. Were we wiping this way in 1997? Like, or is this just like comic style? This is what we're doing.
I guess this was just them trying to. I mean, honestly, probably what it came from is Star Wars, I guess, because I'm assuming because this was the same year they had done the Star Wars, which I mean, I guess they couldn't have seen those, but like the Star Wars that was most popular period probably since the 70s, and the guy who made it, I mean, who the hell wasn't affected by Star Wars when it came out, let alone special effects guys? So like that's probably would guess be why they were so obsessed with like wipes, like transitions.
Yes, because they love them in this. We see DB Sweeney and Teresa Russell. She has a clown air freshener that says love and bandages, and I like paused it to be like, what is going on? Why is that there? It's huge. Like, okay. Anyway, they drive past the leprechaun narrator, and then we pull up to a building where they get future scanned. I love any movie that has future scanning. Ryan and I have a ton of the cyborg movies where they just love, like, you can see right through cars and stuff. So then Martin Sheen and Melinda Clarke is in this scene as Priest, who wasn't a character in the comic, but then does become in the comic. In this scene, Martin Sheen has a battle scorpion ashtray, and Priest is handling a tarantula, so it's like an evil petting zoo in this office.
I love that ashtray. I had to rewind it. I was like, what the shit is that? Because it's an aerial shot. It's like above it. You're like, what is happening there? Like,
that's
what?
An ashtray for no reason.
That is I didn't know. It was like, that's an ashtray.
He puts
so I
the
had to
cigarette out
rewind
there
it just to
while
make
the
sure.
Scorpions fight to their death. It's
What I like about Martin Sheen in this movie is that he's extremely grounded.
yes. Yep, same. I like that, and I like the hair dye job they did.
Yo, he dyed his hair for this?
There's more
It looks
ink,
very natural.
there's more ink in his hair than all of New Line Comics. Or the comic company, did I say that, or did I combine
You were so
podcasts?
close, Dirk. You're
Okay,
so
cool.
close.
I'm clearly the expert.
Image Comics was really the one
damn
that
it.
did. Yeah.
I mean, I will say though, in terms of like Martin Sheen, he seems to understand the movie that he's in the way that most people in this movie don't, which I was just like, it's kind of like my whole thing when I watched Rampage with The Rock, and I was just like, the one person who knows what movie they're in is Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Yeah.
He's the one who's playing it just like, this is stupid. I'm having a good time. He's like this close to having a scotch on the screen at all times. And like Martin Sheen is basically like just doing that, where he's just like, I'm in a ridiculous fucking comic book movie. Who gives a shit, man?
Yeah, he's Nick Nolte and Hulk. You know,
Yes.
he is just absolutely like, this is a comic book movie. We take this over the top. We do ridiculous things.
Yeah.
This is what we do.
The stakes are being raised. He's like, so more gravelly? I'll talk more gravelly. That's how we'll know.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Simmons wants out, but Wynn says one last job. So Simmons heads off to a chemical plant, and he fights one dude, breaks his neck. That was not in the PG-13 in theaters. He sneaks around, finds a couple of guys that are already dead, and then bombs. And it looks like Sheen and Priest are there, and they shoot him and then hose him down with the green goo that's on every machine gun. And then Martin flicks a cigarette at him, and he goes up in flames. And then there's so many explosions.
He knew what was going on all along.
I do believe he's catching on. Enjoy your retirement, old friend. Oh, and by the way, don't worry about Wanda. I'll take good care of her.
You touch her, and you're a dead man.
You are the dead man. See you later, Al.
In the PG-13 version, you don't get the center part of him on fire, just the arms, I guess. The extra fire, they were like, that's too graphic. And then you also have like 3 less explosions. So the people doing the rating system at the time were just so foolish. But that kind of stuff hacked out all of this movie is part of the why, you know, some of the pacing and some of these shots we're talking about where you can't tell who did it. Of course, it's cut to like just ribbons. There's no rhyme or reason for some of this stuff. Like, makes me so frustrated. But they really
That's why you need to watch the director's cut.
yes.
You know, the special effects movie event of the year.
God, I wish.
That's why you gotta get it.
I gotta get that DVD.
Well, you know, it's a platinum series. I mean, it's no joke. They're not effing around here.
That's true. Then we see a flame body fly down the fire hole, and it's the most 1997 in special effects. I love the movie Hideaway. It's a lot of this type of stuff too. If you went to Natural Wonders in the mall in the 90s, they had those magic eye pictures, kind of the same thing there, where you just stare until you see a dolphin or a sailboat. It's pretty great.
The special effects largely in this movie, not to spoil anything, but it reminded me just watching this on this DVD was like, oh, the special effects basically are like a DVD menu.
Yeah,
because the DVD menu is not for this disc is not unlike the opening credits of the actual movie, and you're like, that's basically up to that level. It was DVD movie menus of the late 90s.
Well, menus caught up. I'm just saying they were ahead.
Menus have
of the
taken
curve.
a real big turn.
Yes. He descends a spiral staircase. This is a wide shot, and it's all CG except for the staircase. And the person playing Spawn in this scene was actually one of the animators. So I think that's a cool little thing they mentioned in the, you know. So then a kid offers him water, and it's Maiko, Hughes
I
from
think
Pet
it's Nico, but
Cemetery.
yeah,
Nico,
Pet Cemetery and New Nightmare and
Yes.
Mercury Rising. I don't know why I thought of that, but that's a movie
Good
that
one.
exists.
Deep pull. Okay.
Yeah. Jeez, the fan club right here. Fan club president.
He also wasn't a character that was in the comic, but has since now
Nope.
appeared in the comic. This little
Retconned.
Yep, retconned in there. We learned there's a holy place called Rat City, and it's an alley, so that explains that.
See, again, that's all you need to know.
Yes, we get the sneaker pimps and Marilyn Manson doing Long Hard Road Out of Hell, which I think they both hated to do. We get another wild transition as a helicopter flies by, and we fly through a cross type situation, and more voiceover. We learn he's been in purgatory for 5 years, and his wife's now with DB Sweeney, Terry. So he hides in a bush, all burnt up, and then it's his kid's birthday party, or not his kid, but a kid's birthday party.
It's Wanda's kid's birthday party.
Well, they're not clear in the movie whose kid it is.
Right.
Even Todd McFarlane says in the commentary that they were like trying to keep it a little loose, so you maybe think it's kind of his kid, because that's what my thought was that his kid.
Yeah.
As he got killed, that she was maybe pregnant with. I don't know. Like, I was trying to like fill in some gaps. They're not very clear about whose kid it is exactly, but anyway, regardless, a great place to, if you want to reintegrate yourself into your child's or your wife's life, is just to sneak around in the bushes dressed like a homeless dude.
Yep.
That's always the best way. Burnt up face, just hiding out. Don't worry about me. I'm just hiding out in the darkness while you're having a birthday party. Totally normal. I just want to like reintroduce myself and really get myself back into your lives.
It is pretty. That's, I mean, number one. That's how they say to do it when you come back from purgatory.
That's right. That's right. That's what most therapists recommend. This is, you want to get back in. You've had 5 years off. Sneak around their house and hide in the bushes. That's pretty much how you reintroduced yourself.
Go straight there. Don't wander around.
Oh.
Okay. Next, the clown picks him up off the ground because he's fallen, and his face kind of glowed green for a second because he has necroplasm. Yeah. So they go to an alleyway, and then the clown squeezes cream out of a donut and says, "What does this make you think of?" And then farts, and then pulls out his underwear to reveal skid marks.
What? Hey, easy with that face of meat. Oops. A wet one. I hope I didn't stain my underwear. Ah, look at that. Skid marks.
Get away from me, you freak!
This was also not in the PG-13 scene. He pulled his underwear off, but they didn't do the shot of where we actually get to see the skid mark.
They got rid of the donut part too. They cut all that out because they said it was too. Yeah, a lot of the clown stuff they got either had to cut out or change the lines so that it was less suggestive.
Which I will say this about that performance. I think Leguizamo is going for it as this clown. I think that's great. I don't know what they're doing with the comedy and with the lines he's saying, because none of it's like really served up. None of it's treated like here's the joke. He's kind of just talking weird,
just riffing.
Yeah, I thought he was improvising it, but he wasn't. They take credit for all of those jokes.
Okay,
the writers do, and the director. Doesn't seem like it. So it's really weird, like you were saying, Ryan, tonally, this like, because I think a lot of the performances in here, they're right exactly what they should be, but how it's framed for his.
Yeah, they do Leguizamo really dirty, I feel like, in this, because they don't understand. They think it's funny, but they don't understand why it's funny. And so they don't present it in a way that works. And it's weird because the clown / violator is such an odd character anyway, but they milk him in this because what Leguizamo is like he is doing a great job. It's just, I think he's poorly represented by them. They've done him dirty.
Yeah.
And so they overuse him and you don't really show who he is. In fact, at one point in the commentary, they say like, because he's the villain. And I'm like, that's not how you presented him in this movie.
He's like
you don't
buddy.
present him. Nope. He's like he's the clown buddy. He's this. He's like the goofball. Supposed to be comic relief is how they present it. It's not exactly right, and so it's just such a mishandling.
And that's how they were going. They basically present Jason Wynn as the villain.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
clown is basically like an anti-hero of anything. They don't really
Yeah.
like make him the villain ever.
Not only that, but Malebolgia is the big bad behind it all. So, and when you see that, they show you the images of that, which look like the villain, like the end boss, like an early version of like Doom or something
Yep.
like that. But like, and so not a great end villain. You have so many guys that are doing the special effects here. I'm like, you couldn't have just seen what
Well,
the KMB guys maybe could have put together as the creature. I don't know. Maybe just ask them. I don't know. Who knows what they could have come up with?
and that's like right at this point where the clown makes him have this flashback that goes all the way back to this Malebolgia situation. And then they choose to not have Malebolgia's mouth move because they wanted Hell to be talking through Malebolgia because that's so much more ominous. Only we're not told that. And so in 1997, I just thought they can't afford to animate his mouth.
Right.
That's fair. And it wasn't until he said that I'm like, that's a great idea to have Hell talking, but there's no way for us to know as an audience. And so now, like I say, there's these things that I appreciate about this movie because I go, oh, I see what you were going for because you've explained it to me. I did not know that.
If they had sat at every screening and paused it
Yeah.
and would say, this is what we went for, press play again,
Yeah.
roll the film, then we would be like, oh, okay. And we all would have had a better appreciation for this movie. Unfortunately, we had to watch it on our own and provide our own context.
At one point, Malebolgia was supposed to be a puppet.
Yeah, that actually honestly would have worked. I will say the special effects now look terrible, but like at the time when I was a kid, I was like, this is amazing. But they only held up for like a year or two. Then it was just
everything
like,
was going so quickly. There was the time when I saw Virtuosity and I was like, yes. And now you watch it and you're like, whoa, okay, it's different times. Yeah. But so Malebolgia's there, says, lead my army. And you can see Wanda again. And he's like, yep, I don't even need to think about it. I'm through playing games. Oh, games. Interesting. Perhaps we should play a game right now. Patrick and Ryan, don't worry. You're on the same team because I don't like competition.
Oh, okay.
Already won. So are you ready to play Origin? You glad we're playing a game?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So all I'm going to do is list off an origin for a superpower, and we'll just see if either of you, if it sounds familiar, you could tell me what superhero this was.
Okay.
So, number 1, lured down a subway tunnel and forced to say a magic word.
Shazam?
Yes. Wow.
Okay.
Great.
I don't remember being lured down a sewer tunnel.
I don't remember that part either, but I mean,
yeah,
like, I knew the magic word.
But yeah, magic word.
I did the research, so it's definitely. I have all the issues right here. Number 2, blinded by a radioactive substance.
Daredevil.
Yes, perfect. Number 3, raised by birds and just kind of figured it out.
Hawkman?
Close. Black Condor.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sure.
I did ask my friend Sean Baby for some of these, so the wording might be a little more funny.
Oh, throw him under the bus.
Yep. Number 4, he doesn't listen. Number 4, set on fire and fell in a swamp.
Swamp Thing.
Yes, Swamp Thing. Number 5, cable car shrapnel in the brain. This might be a deeper pull.
Cable car shrapnel in the
cable car shrapnel in the
brain. Is this a superhero or supervillain?
You're a superhero?
I mean, I guess Deathlock, but I don't honestly know.
Good guess. Ryan, do you have anything?
I don't have it. I don't know.
This gives the listener a chance to chime in.
Yeah. Yell at us. Tell us what it is that we're not getting it.
You're right. It's Nightman.
Okay.
Oh.
Is that a guy? That's a guy. Okay, number 6, drank space plastic and got beach ball powers.
Plastic Man?
Oh, yeah, probably.
It's a good guess. It's Bouncing Boy?
Oh shit, I almost said Bouncing Boy, but I didn't think he gained his powers. I thought it was just a matter of like he was one of the Legion and the Legion just had powers.
According to the website, he drank space plastic. Okay, number 7. Drank an extract of Gingold from a soda.
Elongated Man.
Whoa. Okay. All right.
I'm not proud that I know that, but I do.
That's great. I knew none of these. Like when I was reading them up, I was like, I think that's something someone's read about. Number 8, maybe my favorite, Mongoose Blood Transfusion.
No idea.
It's a very early comic book character.
You went real DC, and unfortunately, I was mostly a Marvel kid, but so I'm assuming this is a DC character. Mongoose Blood? I don't know.
It's the Whizzer.
Okay.
Whizzer. It's how
Yep.
it's so fast. It's that mongoose blood.
Okay. Okay.
That was an obvious one. Okay, number 9.
Obvious. Yeah, that was obvious. Sorry. We let you down on that one, Dirk. You really did. You served us up a softball and we completely whiffed it. I
It's
apologize.
the Whizzer. Come on. Okay, number 9.
Duh. I mean, duh.
Exposed to radiation while being swallowed by a space whale.
You lost me at Space Whale.
DC.
DC. Okay.
I have literally no idea.
The
You lost me at
Aquaman?
Space Whale.
I,
No,
I-
he didn't.
Close.
no,
Close.
Aquaman was
Born
just
with his
born into
powers.
it. Yeah.
Ultra Boy.
Okay.
Ultra
Wow.
Boy's
You went deep on some of these.
Ultra Boy's real name, Joe Nuh. And he got his power from a whale.
Oh yeah, he's a Legion guy too. Okay, apparently they all gained powers. I had no idea. They just had
Okay.
powers. All right.
Okay.
Number
Had
10.
a Red Legion of superheroes. I apologize. I'm left behind on some of these.
Number 10. This is the last one, unfortunately. A race of psychic cat people gave this person their power.
Psychic cat people?
Psychic cat people used
Catman?
psychic powers to make this lady who she was.
Oh. Catwoman?
Tigra.
Oh, that makes sense.
Is that a
Okay.
person
Sure.
from Marvel? That's from Marvel.
Yeah.
Ryan. Where were
Yes.
you on that? Where's all your Tigra stuff?
I can tell you where she is now, but I mean, I didn't know her. I honestly didn't know. I mean, I read West Coast Avengers and stuff when I was a kid, but I never knew where her powers.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's certain characters where like their origins come
Yeah.
up like every so often, and then
Yeah.
there's ones that just they don't.
There's literal like some of the bigger comic books will tell you their origin, even though you know, like it's a well-known character. You
Yeah.
know, Spider-Man will they'll constantly tell you, well, when I got bitten by that spider, it's like we know, we know. But little characters like Tigra, or I should say, less well-known characters like Tigra, they don't go back and revisit that origin story. You know, so
Yeah.
I mean, she's currently in a lot of Moon Knight stuff.
Yeah.
So I know the character; she's around a lot, but they never go back and go, yeah, she was raised by all these psychic cat people. It was news to me. News to me.
Yeah, that's never come up in any comics that I've read.
Yep.
Well, it should. It's a fascinating fact about them. If
Yep.
it happened to me, I wouldn't stop talking about it. Back in the film, we get another flashback to the grave, and there's a shovel that's like Leguizamo's face, and it talks. And this is one of the details where I was like, oh no, do I love this? Because it's just one effect, and I just am like, they did this. They went through and made this thing. He holds up a necklace to his chest, and his chest just eats it. It's just
Yeah.
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Speaking
Looks
of eating,
good. Looks good.
yes. Speaking of eating,
Holds up.
Leguizamo eats pizza that has mealworms on it, and
Uh-huh.
he did this twice. He did 2 takes of it,
And they really were mealworms.
and they say
Yeah.
in the commentary that their animal wrangler on set was like, he didn't really hurt those worms, did he? And they're like, yeah, and she was super mad about it. And then they said, what do you do with the worms? And she goes, oh, we throw those away. And I was like, oh, all right, well,
They play it in the commentary. They act like, and then this one's just yelling at us like,
Yes.
what about these earthworms? And I'm like, well, that is that person's job.
yes.
And they have a thing that comes up at the end credits where they say, no animals were
So-
harmed in the shooting of this film. Well, that's not going to make it on this one.
Nope.
So,
You can't read the end credits anyway. They do so many weird effects to it.
it is
It's, like,
true. Yeah.
jarring. So Simmons has his superpowers. He kicks through a wall, and he punches a dumpster. He's got glowing spike fist. It's very exciting. And then he turns around, and Leprechaun guy's there, and Spawn walks past him. And then Calestro, he has a knife arm that comes out and then goes back. And I was like, I'm ready for this to be a major part of this film, which is not. We get a crazy zoom into a building through a window, and it's the news. And Terry is like the spokesman for Michael Sheen or something. And Michael Sheen has one of my favorite props in the entire movie, which is a tiny CD-ROM that someone with a label printer has printed on it. Oh my God. This thing is like my favorite special ops thing I've ever seen, because if you have something that's special ops, you got to label it properly. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want
Also,
that.
they had that. It was not just a regular size CD; it was those mini CDs.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Which also like dates this so
That's it.
like
It was the
perfectly.
future.
Right? Because that was going to be the next step, where it was like
Yeah.
CDs are going to get tinier, and
Yeah.
that did not take off.
I still have the Nine Inch Nails Broken EP from '92 with the mini CD, the 2
Mhm.
songs. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be all the rage. And no, 5 years later, nobody's doing tiny CDs.
No, they were like the tray inside the CD tray.
Yeah.
That's the thing you're gonna want to play your music on. And
they did like the mini discs in like Demolition Man, and they were just like, the future.
Yep, and did not take off.
Michael Sheen says he's going to kill everyone with a disease called Heat 16. And now it's cape time. We get so much CGI cape. I absolutely love it. This probably would have benefited a couple extra days of shooting because he takes.
Yeah, they should have given him a couple weeks off of the shooting schedule so they could really get the. Well, the problem is they had to do it so much later. They added more cape stuff later.
Yeah,
and so they added more money to the budget because they wanted to have more moments with the cape.
Yeah, no, what I think they needed more time for was that he takes out 2 guards and we don't even see it. Like,
right.
It's now special effects money. We're not watching Michael J. White, who is capable of doing choreographed fights, and we're not.
And he doesn't do it in this.
And that's when I started to be like, oh, this was the decisions were special effects is what we were going for, not the reason you cast Michael J. White in.
I mean, to be fair, nobody knew who the hell Michael J. White was at this point. Like, I had no idea who he was. And then it wasn't until like he became like the direct-to-video king that everyone like, now you're like, how the fuck do they not have fights with Michael J. White?
Right.
Yeah. At the time, it was just like random dude who was capable, and they were like, sure, why not?
But you knew like because I went in the theater knowing like, oh, they cast this guy who's like a martial artist. So I knew that much about Michael J. White. You don't see that in the movie. They could have, they could have cast, I don't know, Will Smith.
Or Snoop Dogg.
I mean, honestly, if Snoop Dogg played the part, this would probably be one of my favorite movies of all time.
Or any of the other rappers that are in West Coast Alliance or whatever you mentioned earlier, where I was like, is that like D12? I don't know. Sounds like one of those rap groups, the rap super groups. But
the Heat 16, getting back to it, is when they put it in his body, that is one of the moments that I'm like, what an incredible, wonderful, terrible idea that is. I love that so much, like, because if you kill him, it'll definitely explode. And I mean, wonderful.
Well, I love that they're like, we could put this thing, and they explain it to him, the worst plan ever. And he goes,
so dumb.
I like this idea. Let's do it. And you're just
from
like,
the operating table.
What?
He's like, good job, everybody. Good job putting that inside me.
Good work, Doc.
But it is so ludicrous. Again, he's the only one who really knows what kind of movie he's in.
Yeah. I love this next set piece where they're at the big gala.
Jessica Priest is there, and they have a cameo from Angela.
Well, and Priest was designed after like Aeon Flux, they say in the commentary, and like Ghost in a Shell. Has a cool outfit with a backpack that connects to the machine guns, which you got to have. And there's 2 things I love about the scene. One, Spawn kicks Martin Sheen and he flies onto a table. It looks really, really funny. And like in a fun, like he actually kicked him kind of way. And then the part where they're gunfighting, that sounds really lame, but they're firing at each other. And you see the extras behind him getting hit by like every bullet. There's a lady in a dress who I had to rewind it like 3 times because I was laughing so hard. She really gets like, she looks like she's shot and flies onto the table in her green gown. It's chef's kiss. They've murdered her. And in the PG-13 version, no guards were shot in this sequence by Spawn, which means he just did a flip shooting behind him for no reason and then just disappears, which would make not a lot of sense. You wouldn't enjoy it as much as in this version, the R-rated version, where he actually gets to shoot a bunch of people who were just doing their job that day. Oh my goodness. Spawn falls down in a hallway and we see his glowing green bullet holes and he says his classic Spawn line, damn.
Everyone's got a catchphrase.
Everyone says it, and I'm like,
I mean,
that's fun.
You mentioned the glowing green. I don't know if you know, because it's like they don't explain it in the movie at all.
I don't.
In the comic, there's a whole thing where basically he has the ectoplasm that gives him his powers, and there's it's a finite amount. And like it was always something that I thought was interesting in the comic when I was a kid, where it's like he can only use his powers so much before he gets pulled back to hell, whether he wants to or not. And they completely gloss over it in the movie.
They don't use that
at all.
Yeah. They don't, Because again, as it gets into it, he eventually like defies Malbolgia and hell itself I remember thinking this at the time I saw it and thought it again, rewatching it for this. I'm like, how does he still have his powers? If Hell's like, well, no, if you don't do my job, I gave you a choice, lead my army from Hell and you can see your wife again. And if he's like, no, I'm not going to lead your army from Hell, like, then how is he able to do anything?
Yeah, in the comics, there was like a little like almost like a timer where it was like 9, 9, 9, 9, 9,
Right,
whatever.
right.
And like every time he used it, it would tick down, which is why he would usually try to use them like sparingly and find other ways. Which is why he used guns most of the time, was because it was like it wouldn't be using his powers. Plus, there was one incident where he tried to turn himself back into Al Simmons, like the way he looked when he was Al Simmons, to present to Wanda. And the best he could do was turn himself into a nerdy looking white man. And he wasted a bunch of power on it, which is why from that point forward he never bothered trying to be Al Simmons ever again.
Yeah, Ryan.
That's cool. They used that timer in the HBO series. Yeah.
Ryan, there was a deleted scene here where all the Spawns had left their day jobs to come see Spawn say like he wasn't gonna do it. So when he said no, some of those Spawns were like, "Oh no," and they ran back to their desks because you have to do all this through paperwork. So they had to write down that like we need to get his powers back, so we need to get this over to the office over here. They were still using fax machines. And
well, that's a whole offboarding situation.
Yeah.
And so Hell has to be like, well, we just had a new hire, but unfortunately,
it's gone for a little bit longer. But once this paperwork goes through, we'll have the powers back.
It just takes some time. Yeah, he basically put in a 2 weeks notice to Hell.
Yes,
so.
that's what it was. Yeah, they're like, oh.
So we're not taking back your laptop. You still get your laptop for 2 weeks, and then we got to take it back from you. It's the same thing as his powers.
Yeah. Next, he climbs the wall. This is the wall climbing sequence where he's got the chains because he falls out the window, and then he sticks to the wall, and then he has octopus hands. And if you watch this now and pay attention, there's awesome sound effects for when he's grabbing onto the wall, which I really love that detail. This is a crazy special effects shootout situation that I think is pretty fun. He also says his classic Spawn line, "Holy shit."
Damn. Oh, holy shit. Yeah. I thought he would say damn there, but yeah, he mixes it up sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's quite a feat. Back on the scene, they wheel out Priest and shows her on like a smoking gurney. And they mentioned this in the commentary, and it's so true because I only saw this once in the theater, and it came right back to me that I was like, "Oh, they're gonna bring her back," and then they don't. They can't.
Nope.
They run out of time and money. She was gonna be like a cyborg help priest person, and that would have been amazing. She looks super cool with the smoke and the bullet hole in her face and everything. Anyway, sadly doesn't happen.
But they don't do it. They're like, save it for
well,
the
there was a
sequel.
character. Yeah, there was a character in the comics. I think it was like Overkill, where it was like a cyborg creature. So I'm guessing they would have probably just made her that essentially.
Yeah. I'm here for it. Next, we see Martin Sheen and the clown talk a little bit. This is the part where he says, "That's a good idea. I like that."
That's a good idea. I like that.
And then the clown has 2 prostitutes, and he says, "Who wants to ride the clown's pink pony?" And this was cut for the film in the theaters.
The PG-13, yeah. The directors, I think the director said it was his favorite line. It was somebody's favorite line. The producer, the director, they loved that line. Again, they thought what he was doing was absolutely hilarious, but they don't introduce it right. So the comedy doesn't, at least for me, does not play.
Well, and here is so obvious because, he Spawn goes to see Wanda do a TED Talk, and then her kid is playing basketball with the dog, and then he talks to them for a little bit. And then Clown is there in a cheerleading outfit, and they thought this was amazing, and they fought to keep it in the movie, and it's there, but why is it there?
Right.
Like, all he does is he gets pulled into hell after that moment. It's just, there's no, like, music on, it's just so weird that he would even, because is this Beetlejuice effect? What is happening with this character? It's fascinating, and I don't mean that I dislike it, because it's one of the other things in this movie where I'm like, I love that they're going this big for these things, and then they're confused at like, why do we do this? Why is it in here? Well, I want to keep it. So amazing. So Terry picks up Wanda and Cyan, and the dog won't leave Spawn. So he says to the dog, "You don't want to go where I'm going." And then the dog just stares at him and he goes, "All right, but it's your funeral." And I was like, "Is he threatening? It's bad." Like, what? Okay.
Wait, he's gonna kill the dog?
It's so weird. And then right after that, we're in the alleyway and the kid spits out the food. So his dad hits him, which was cut from the PG-13 movie.
Okay.
And Spawn almost kills the dad in front of the kid. And I'm like, wow. Oh, all right.
And there's the Todd McFarlane cameo in that
yes,
part.
this is the scene where Todd McFarlane's a bum. It's pretty great.
And he talks about it in the commentary like it's so because he's my own creation is aiming his guns at me, Todd McFarlane, the creator. I mean, pretty cool. And it was like, dude, no one's doing that, putting that much thought behind it, dude. But I appreciate it. But good for you, man.
Of the 5 people in the theater with me when I saw it, I don't think
Not
any
many
of us knew it was him.
Yeah.
But now I like anytime that happens in a film.
That Tom McFarlane shows up.
Yes.
It only happens once, but
Is
that's a good part.
All right. Well, I think I see him all the time.
I hope that's your
You're
letterbox
face blind,
review.
you just see.
Yeah, I have face blind list. It's all Todd McFarlane. So
I love Todd McFarlane in Apocalypse Now. Like, oh nope, that's not him. That's more
like,
you just think he's everyone.
It was so crazy when Todd McFarlane got stung by bees and died, and her dad, Dan Aykroyd, was like, "That was him, right?" I thought it was. Next, we get an amazing surgery in the movie, and I love that Martin Sheen is awake for the entire surgery and just giving feedback. It's really fantastic.
Just numb me. Don't put me down. Don't put me out. Just numb me real good.
There's a whole back
open heart surgery.
There's a whole back and forth of a scene with the clown on the rooftop, and there's a line that was cut in this scene. It was a soup in your mama's crotch was cut for the PG-13. It's very gross. And then he mutates into this giant lizard. This is when my wife walked into the room and was like, "What are you watching?" I rewound it. I was like, "Watch this clown turn into Violator." And then she just left. She had no more questions. I like this transition, and the rampage sequence that happens here, I get a lot of joy out of it. In this commentary, they mention how one of the guys that gets picked up by Violator was CG because they only had the actor for like one day or something.
The kid's dad. It's the kid's dad there.
Yeah,
that gets picked up by Violator there.
No one's gonna blink an eye in this movie and be like, "Hey, why is that a special effect?" Like,
well, I mean, you can see that he's not real. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
That's the part that took you out.
That's the bridge too far.
No, it's not. I mean, there's a lot of the effects that you're like, well, that doesn't hold up very well, and that also didn't hold up. But yeah, I mean, the fact that he was gone, they only had him for a week, and he had to go do another project. Is like, okay, sure. I mean, okay. I now know that in my brain. That's unfortunate. I wish I could have used that for something else. That synapse has been fired, so oh well.
Yeah, it's all gone. They fight and Spawn gets impaled on a fence. He's essentially like crucified. There's a whole sequence where he steals a motorbike and they're wrapping up towards the end. And it's if anyone has anything they want to throw out here, because we have just so much movie to cover, and I got to get Patrick to this drive-in.
There's a line that says "Every day is Halloween in hell," or basically, which I was like, I didn't know that's what the song meant. That looks bad. There's also a Girly Man reference that I believe that Leguizamo makes, which is great because it's so, again, such a perfectly timed thing in the 90s because it's a reference of a spoof of Arnold Schwarzenegger from SNL, and so great. And I'm like, that's another, much like the effects, something that people will go, why was that said? Doesn't make any sense.
He also says like burnt man walking at one point, which is like a dead man walking thing that I was just like, no one gets it.
Well, I mean, there's enough of like, that's a thing that they say when like a prisoner is being brought to it, that it's not specific to the movie, but like still you have to kind of know the reference. But like the Girly Man reference, I think at this point is, I mean, unless you're a real SNL aficionado or grew up during that era, because they never made the movie. There was going to be a movie, etc., with Hans and Franz, but they never did it. So it doesn't have like, it's not
cultural, like
it's not in the it doesn't, it's not quite in the zeitgeist as I think they thought it was going to be.
I think it's just like Leguizamo, for one thing, he has had a weird 90s, like in general, where he had like Super Mario Brothers, he had Executive Decision, it was briefly in Die Hard 2.
Yep.
Romeo and Juliet, for Christ's sake. His 90s was all over the freaking place. The thing that I will say, and God help us all, but the first thing I think of when I think of Jean-Luc Leguizamo is him as Cloud. And he's done other things, better things that I like more. But for some reason, the first thing I think of when somebody says his name is him as Clown. So God bless him for this performance.
Yeah.
It's weird to me though that they only do Looney Tunes stuff with him twice, because the cheerleader is just an outfit, whereas like he does the balloon head part in one thing coming up in
And
this
then
section,
shakes it.
and he does the big eyeball thing, like that the Looney Tunes characters do when they see something that's attractive.
I think he also shakes the clown makeup
Oh,
off his head.
Yeah. So there's like 3 little things, but it's not like we don't even know what Clown's capable of doing if he can like shapeshift and all this stuff until eventually the Violator part, which he lists off. He's not all these different things, and those were all things from the comic book, right? Those are all different.
Well, there was like in the comics, there was like a bunch of different demons.
Indicator and
it was like Violator was the most famous one because it was also a clown. It was kind of like because they really like the most iconic parts of the comic are Clown / Violator and Spawn. The rest of it, you don't necessarily. I guess it's the same thing with like when you think of like Batman, you think of like Batman and the Joker. It's like it's very specific in terms of if you really think about it, you'll think of other things. But like there's like certain things that pop into your head instantaneously, and it's like Spawn and Clown / Violator. So it's like they cut out the whole thing of all the other demons, which is fine. I kind of wish their fight felt like a fight instead of just like a big action sequence.
Yeah.
Because again, the comic, that was the thing. Is I remember when I read it when I was a kid, I was like, it's gross. Violator eats Al's heart. Like at one point, it's very gross and graphic. That was like the thing that was kind of what drew me to Spawn comics when they came out. Was because it wasn't like the McFarlane thing necessarily. It was mostly the fact that it was we're going to do a superhero, but we're going to do a superhero that's like entrenched in like horror culture. It's like if a horror like slasher almost became a superhero, like what does that look like? So it was kind of like taking elements of horror comics and taking elements of superhero comics and taking elements of horror movies and just like kind of shoving them all together. And that was like kind of the hook for me. And then the movie kind of just as like, and again, I'm guessing it's probably mostly a studio thing. It could be the director. I have no idea, but they definitely kind of, I feel like, abandoned a lot of the horror stuff in the name of making like a traditional superhero movie, which is just like, it's not really a bad thing. Like it doesn't like, I don't dislike the movie anyway, because Todd has been for basically since this movie came out, so like decades, has been talking about the next movie for so long. And like 10 years ago, Blumhouse took over where they were like, we're going to do it. It can be us. And then it's like, it's still nothing has happened. But I'm like, at one point, if they did one that was closer to the comic, I'd be into it. But it's like, I would like to see something that is more like horror oriented. And they talked about like Jamie Foxx playing Al / Spawn, which I would be fine with. So it's like, I don't dislike the movie as it exists. It's a fun time. It's insane, but it's fun. It's like, again, it's like, I put it in the same category as like The Phantom, where it's like, The Phantom is ridiculous, but it's entertaining, but it doesn't really capture Spawn the way that I feel like it should, but whatever.
I think it deserves something like The Punisher, where they just keep going, what about this one? What about this one? And like you talked about, Patrick, that no one's really kind of nailed the tone of The Punisher really well. And so it's like, let's give this property the same kind of like, just give them another shot. Because like you said, there's a horror thing. There's so many different tones and ways that you could approach the subject that like, it's been a long time. And maybe it's just animation. Maybe that is the best way to do it. But the way that effects are now, I mean, we're getting another... What's the really goopy Spider-Man guy with the
Venom?
Yeah,
Venom.
Thanks.
Yeah,
thanks. There goes all my comic book listeners. Yeah, I mean, a third one of that, is that what it is? Yeah, which like people are seeing it. It's making money, so they could do a Spawn situation.
Yeah, that's another series though that they don't understand the tone of it either.
Oh, damn it!
I liked it when I was a kid, but as like once I got like out of my teens, I was like, this is so annoying. Like it's just like it's so like self-important and self whatever. And then like when they made the movie, they were like, we're basically gonna do a full moon features superhero movie. I was like, I am all in. I am so glad you did Venom this way.
Well, the first one though, like has so many horror elements, but as soon as they get close to that, they pull out and then they cut the whole killing or whatever. Because Venom as a symbiote is like very vicious. And so it's all about the person that is connected to it and how they use it. But in the movie, he wants to murder people. It's like a complete, like, he just wants to kill people. So it's a matter of him kind of bring him back into it. As soon as they get near all that sort of horror element, they like kind of pull back. I'm like, do you not know what this is? Like, let us just enjoy it. Cause I mean, the first one I actually kind of liked it to a point because they just wouldn't let, but they're like, we don't want to go that far. I'm like, go that far, go crazy. It's Venom. You're trying to be like, well, we still want to make him heroic and likable. Like, he's Venom.
That's always been the issue with that character in general. Was it's
Right.
like they always kind of swing back and forth on how heroic they want to make him or not heroic. Like that's been that issue with that character.
Yeah,
for
that's
as
why
long
they
as I
gave
can
him
remember.
that's why I think they gave him a kid, and then they're like,
Yeah.
well, he's got a kid. He's like not terrible. See, like he's got a kid he wants to kind of live and grow up and see, and then the kid gets Venom attached to him, and then anyway. So we're not here to talk about Venom.
Nope, we are. We're here to talk about.
Oh, surprise!
So anyway, I don't want people to, I don't, that's what it is. I'm not going to ruin the end for this movie, so I won't talk about it. But
Okay, there you
I'll
go.
say it all takes place in a living room, just like Beetlejuice, and there is a fireplace involved, just like Beetlejuice. That's where all the similarities. And I did really like that now I'm talking about it. Violator is finished, but then comes through the wall, and we get this whole sequence where his head gets cut off, and there's all these effects that because they made it green, they could do it. Because if it was blood, it would not be PG-13. And I think that's genius because the clown trying to lift his head up with his tongue is very funny to me. It's a funny gag that I think I appreciate it. I would love to see the footage of Leguizamo shooting that part, just him in a suit with like some type of sheet over him, just like yeah.
Right.
That's good stuff. Anyway,
I like one more thing is that he says at one point, he's like, I'm through doing Hell's dirty work. And I'm like, you've not done very much work for Hell at all throughout the movie. Like, you haven't really done the dirty work, to be honest.
Two things. I love the belt buckle that bites the lady's ankle when she goes to kick him in the crotch. And I love the part where Caligula or whatever, the leprechaun guy, when he's like, you gotta not play their game, and then Spawn's like, I'll play their game dirty, and he's like, no, like what? So funny that like Spawn just doesn't get it. So then he ties him up in chains for 3 seconds, and then he's like, now I'm listening. Okay, good. It's a fantastic sequence. But anyway, that's the end of Spawn. Any final thoughts?
I hadn't watched it in a long time. I've had a weird journey with the character because like when I was a kid, it was the most insanely important thing in the world to me. I loved it so much, like when it came out. It's why to this day I still have a bit of bitterness, and I still kind of hate Air Force One because it beat at the box office, which is a stupid thing. But my like child's brain has held on to this for decades.
I love
now.
that. That's amazing.
I tried to like reread all the Spawn stuff when I was older, and I was just like, oh God, this is not like Todd is not a writer.
He's not a good writer. No.
I watched the movie and I'm like, Jesus Christ. I waited like a little while, the last couple of years, like I started rereading it again. And I'm just like, it's something where you kind of, I feel like you have to judge it in the context of the time, where it's kind of like, if you read like Silver Age Marvel stuff out of context, it seems really stupid. And it's kind of the same with Spawn, where it's like, it's trying to do 90s comics, but the problem is everybody was trying to do Frank Miller and Alan Moore, but nobody was Frank Miller or Alan Moore, so none of that really landed. The fact that he was at least doing something original, I'll give credit where credit's due. The storytelling has its moments. I enjoy looking back on it now, kind of like a time capsule of like that era. Just like watching those movies, it's like it's kind of a time capsule of like when superhero movies were kind of, you didn't know what you were going to get when you walked into them. Even though, again, like I love pretty much everything in the MCU. There's so much comic book stuff that I love, and I hate that people shit on it. But it's like, it does make me happy, like when I'm watching something and it's not at all what I ever could have thought that it was.
Sure.
This kind of falls in that category where I'm just like, it's not what you'd expect when you think of a superhero movie, for better and for worse.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, Patrick, because I totally agree with you. This is before Blade and really before the original X-Men trilogy. And so they don't really know what to do with superheroes. And they only had really Rocketeer and around that time, and the Shadow and things that didn't really quite work, Darkman. And it's trying to be some of those things. It doesn't really know how to land it. But one thing I was thinking about in watching this and listening to Todd McFarlane is he said he came up with Spawn when he was a teenager. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. And you kind of get into this as a teenager, and it makes sense why they try to make this PG-13, though I think that they kind of cut it off its knees to make it so. Because I think there's something about Spawn that really makes sense as a teenager, because even Todd McFarlane, who I think is an incredible artist, but not a great storyteller, he doesn't know. He's just like, well, he's from hell and he's got powers because of hell, but like he hasn't worked everything out. He has to work it out as he gets into the series. He's not worked it out. And so I think that's why it becomes so confusingly told in this film, because the rules of all these things, the aspects of it, aren't clear. And if they're not clear, somebody else is going to interpret them in a different way that maybe makes them more confusing. But it's a story that when I was watching it and hearing that, I thought, okay, this makes sense. This is a teen thing. He came up with it when he was a teen. He was like just thinking dark things, doesn't think them all through because he's a teen, puts it all out eventually as an adult, still hasn't come up with a lot of the reasons, still hasn't really thought it all through. But like it became a phenomenon, came a and because it hit people, I think, at a certain time, at a certain age. So it's interesting you said all that, because that's something I was thinking about watching it again this time, because for me it just kind of missed the whole phenomenon of Spawn. I have a bunch of the comics and stuff, much like our discussion about Robert Rodriguez, which now makes a lot of sense in this episode. Maybe Todd McFarlane should have brought in a writer to kind of help him think through some of this stuff a little bit more and flesh out some of his ideas, much like Robert Rodriguez could use a few more people in his,
he did, and then he was just trying to take credit for them. Like, because he had Neil Gaiman come in, and Neil Gaiman created Medieval Spawn and Cogliostro and Angela.
Yeah,
and he was just
true.
like, well, this is all mine. And like, he brought in Dave Sim and Cerberus, and it was just like, so he did do that. He then was just like, oh, this is mine now, though. Which was the antithesis of what Image Comics was.
Yeah, so true. So true. Which is still going today. I'll give him that. And what's interesting is that model is still there, just for Dirk to know that like people go to Marvel or DC and they start like writing and they get work there, and then they run over to Image and they create their own stuff, hoping that will take off, much like The Walking Dead, which was an Image comic.
Yeah, Robert Kirkman was a guy, he became one of the heads of Image when he jumped over, because he kind of had that epiphany before everybody else kind of his generation. He created Invincible, he created Walking Dead because he wanted to like just have them and those be his.
Right.
And it's like, which is what you can get with Image, you can't get elsewhere. I mentioned Len Wein, but even like a recent example, I remember hearing Ed Brubaker on a podcast, and he was like, I'm of two minds about the Winter Soldier thing, because on the one hand, it's really cool to see kids showing up at my house on Halloween dressed as this character that I wrote. He's like, on the other hand, the fact that Marvel is making more money than I will ever see in my entire life, and I will get none of it, really fucking bums me out. So he's like, I have kind of two things. And I was like, I think that kind of a summation of the comics industry. It's why he exclusively works for Image. Like he writes exclusively for Image now, because whatever he wants to do, he can do, and it's all his, and he doesn't have to worry about anyone else. Image has it went from being kind of the rip-off kind of artist academy to being probably the most original comic stuff you could possibly find, because it's everything from like Deadly Class to Invincible to like Walking Dead. It's anything you can think of, you can just make a comic and you own it and it's yours. And if they make a movie, you're involved. Like if they make a TV show, you're involved.
Yeah, you own it straight out. Image doesn't own the stuff at all. They get a percentage of the sales.
Yeah.
The work is always owned by the writer and artist. So
yeah, which I love.
Which is cool. Yeah, it's a super cool idea that it's become that sort of really cool idea where artist-owned work can thrive.
Well, my final thoughts on Spawn is that I really like this movie, and it's not what anyone wanted it to be. And I think that's unfortunate. And I think that that's fair. If you don't like Spawn, you don't find it enjoyable, but I think it's fascinating for what the end result is. And watching it, like I said, in high definition, all these years after it came out, I just really found a lot of things that I was like, that's weird. I'm glad that happened. And if I'm not holding all the cutting and everything against it, yeah, I think that there's things worth seeing. I hope it gets a shot at another interpretation. So thank you both for revisiting Spawn with me. There's no other podcast saying anything good about it. So we're the only one in existence. Patrick, where can people find you?
If you're looking for just me, it's Alleyway Crew basically everywhere, like Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, whatever. The show that I do with Rob, Chainsaws and Claws, is basically Chainsaws Claws everywhere, or Chainsaws and Claws. Any place that you happen to be looking for us, we are on all the major podcast platforms with the show, and both of us are on all the major social media platforms as both ourselves and the show.
Okay. And the one comic that you would like to see be a movie?
Some of the things that I would have said were things that they made TV shows of, but I feel like that's cheating. There's a current comic, speaking of Image Comics, called Saga, that is very much kind of like this fantasy space opera book. I would love to see that interpreted either as a show or as a movie. My favorite comic ever is Preacher. They made a TV show out of that, so I can't really pick that one.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say Saga.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good comic.
Ryan, where can people find you?
Well, just find the show, New World Pictures Podcast. That we have a website, newworldpicturespodcast.com. That's where you can find everything about us, and you can find all our socials there. So that's where I would direct everyone to go. As far as the comic, we brought up Ed Brubaker, one of my favorite writers, and he's been doing this series called Reckless.
I love that book.
Which
I about this before.
Yeah, I talked about this on your podcast before,
Oh.
and it's is like kind of a guy set in the 70s and 80s who like lives in a movie theater, and he sort of is like a not really a private detective, but people will call him when they want certain things, like they just want something done, and he'll like maybe do it if he feels like doing it, or maybe he'll surf, or maybe he'll get involved with some woman. Anyway, it's all sort of very sort of loose, kind of Rockford Files-y kind of an idea, and I absolutely love it. And this series is fantastic. He and his artist partner, they just sort of been, they've just been doing just these sort of like graphic novel one-shot kind of things, but it's set up to be like an excellent like 6-episode series or a movie series. I think it could go either way. I would love to see this be turned into something because it's a very cool concept. It's very well done.
100%.
Nice. Mine would be Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. I would
Yes.
love to see that turned into something. I don't know how you could do it. Maybe the bloodiest thing in existence. Just give it to Takashi Miike. I want to see what he would do with it. I think that would be great. But thank you both for joining me and watching Spawanda.
Thank you for having me. It's great meeting you, Patrick.
You too.
As always, I'm Dirk Marshall, and this has been VHS.
Would you really want